Welcome to the Happy Doc, the voice of fulfilled physicians. This show is about bringing inspirational, creative, successful, and happy health professionals to you. Get ready to learn how you can be a happy doctor too. This episode is brought to you by locumstory.com. Shares the ups, downs, and all-around adventures physicians have while doing locum tenens assignments. Whether you are fighting burnout, want to see the world, or just need a change of pace, locum tenens may be just what you need. Learn more about how locum tenens works, trends in the industry, and read inspiring physician stories at locumstory.com. That's LOCUM story.com. Before we begin this episode, a couple of shout outs. I want to send a thank you to Dr. Mark Leeds. He said, "My best patients are the ones who investigate me thoroughly before coming in for the first time. They look at Google reviews. They read my website and blog. This has worked great so far, and now I've taken it a step further. Inspired by Taylor Brana's Happy Doc podcast, I decided to try out podcasting. Now new patients have already listened to me speak with my guests on the podcasts. There are no surprises." And Dr. Mark Leeds, thank you so much for giving us a shout out. Really appreciate it. And it's not just me on this team, by the way. There's many other people in the background. Dr. Neil Desai, Jackie So, Antonio Almeida Lopez, pre-med student, and Alex Iacono. Also want to give them shout outs as well because without them, we wouldn't be able to produce this. So thank you guys. And with Mark Leeds, I want to mention his podcast. He created the Rehab Podcast. So please, please, please check that out. And number two, second shout out, I want to say thank you to Dr. Saray Stankic. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. She said, "Thank you for shedding light on this all-important topic, the Happy Doc. As a community of healthcare professionals, we need to partner to find solutions to this widespread phenomenon of depression, fatigue, and poor health amongst those in society who should represent the optimal example of health and well-being. A recent review of the literature showed that suicide rates among physicians are more than double that of the general population. I believe the solution in large part is lifestyle medicine. Not only should we impart this life-saving education and empowerment to our patients, but we too must walk the talk and lead by example." So thank you so much, Dr. Saray Stankic. We appreciate the positive feedback we're getting on social media. Our next guest is Dr. Nicole Swiner, and in this episode, we're going to learn a lot about her and what she's doing. She's an author, she's a speaker, and she's a family physician. And there are many points that we get out of this conversation, some highlights. We are going to learn about the importance of seeking support. Number two, the difficulties, the risks, and the benefits of developing your own practice, as well as the challenges and why partners were so important for her. Number three, discussing the Superwoman Complex, one of the books she published, and tips she has for having that complex. Number four, her book on thinking about quitting medicine. We discuss what that book was about and some of the things she learned through that process. And lastly, a simple takeaway she wants to leave with all of the listeners today. So check her out. Her website is docswiner.com, and you can find her on social media. Just search at Doc Swiner. Without further ado, let's enjoy this episode with Dr. Nicole Swiner. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Happy Doc. This is your host, Dr. Taylor Brana. Super pumped for our next guest, Doc Swiner.
Hey.
Awesome. I love it. She's smiling in the background. It's going to be great. So to begin this conversation, let's not talk about medicine at all for a second. What's something you really enjoy doing that, gives you energy?
I love right now, I'm married with 2 kids. So, date night is always important to me and my husband. We're into live music.
Wow. Great.
And being where we are in Durham, North Carolina, it's a not many people know this if you're not from this area, but Durham is popping right now in terms of art, music, food, culture, live music. There's a lot of music festivals that are here. So on any given week, we can go and hear a live band and dance and have fun.
That's awesome. I love it. I love music. Do you have a specific type of music that you enjoy, or everything?
I'm mostly probably neo soul and hip hop are probably my two favorite, because that's what I grew up with. So
wait, I have no idea. What is neo soul? Like, I've never heard that before.
yeah. So have you ever heard of Erykah Badu and Jill Scott and The Roots? And
yes, actually, yeah, I've heard of The Roots. This is like totally not my field, so I'm just like really like, yeah.
So good old fashioned soul is like probably what your parents or their parents grew up with.
Yeah.
Bluesy. Neo soul has more of a funk and R&B background to it.
Yeah.
So the Roots that perform for Jimmy, I think it's Jimmy Fallon, their background, which is largely rooted in hip hop, and Erykah Badu is kind of the queen. Neo soul kind of became popular back in the late 90s when I was in, you guys are young, but when I was in college and high school in the 90s, that's when it really became popular. So
yeah. So just out of curiosity, so people don't often know this about me, but I breakdance. So like,
that's amazing.
Can I b-boy to neo soul?
Absolutely.
Yes. All right.
Yes.
After this conversation, I'm sorry guys, this is like totally my own selfish like thing right now. But after this conversation, we're looking up neo soul, and I'm definitely gonna get down to that. That's awesome. Okay, cool. So that's great. I figured out a new genre I've never heard of. So love neo soul music. That's great, and you get energy from that. Awesome. And you're in North Carolina, as we discussed. So let's hop into a little bit of your medical journey. How did that start for you?
So I am originally from Charleston, South Carolina, and growing up and going to high school, I, did well in school, made good grades and all of that, loved math and science. So I think I was kind of, strongly encouraged to get into like the STEM area of school and career, and was blessed to have some role models that were in dentistry and medicine and dealing with patient care. And I knew I loved kids. Mm-hmm. So people that I was blessed to be around definitely encouraged me to think about medicine and think about a career in science. So, back in high school, I can remember having those influences. And then once I got to college, I was blessed to get into Duke University. So that's when I, first had my taste of North Carolina. And, knew that I wanted to get into pre-med in some way. Fast forward, I always thought I was going to be a pediatrician when I grew up, because I loved babies and loved kids. And then interestingly, before we started recording, you were telling me about how, you kind of had your struggles in medical school. So did I. Actually, in college, I struggled through college, almost failed orgo twice. Oh my God,
orgo.
I'm sorry, I don't want to bring back.
I'm getting some PTSD on that one. Anyways, go on.
I break out in high. So tutored and struggled and prayed my way through all the courses that we had to get through for prerequisites, but applied to maybe 10 medical schools, didn't get into any of them.
Wow.
And so, including MUSC, my home school. Mm-hmm. So I struggled with that, that situation. I said, okay, well, what am I going to do? Am I going to work at Gap? I'm going to work at Target. What am I going to do?
Yeah.
Spent my entire career working toward this goal. Lo and behold, I still to this day have no idea how it happened, but lo and behold, after getting a rejection letter from MUSC, 2 to 3 weeks later, I then received an acceptance letter from MUSC. To this day, Jesus, I don't know who did it, but somebody did. So that was the only school I got accepted to, so I had to go back home, and I was fine with that. I was fine. And so again, even though, Duke, really good school, had to learn how to study and get through that, I had to relearn how to study again, medical school, because of the massive amount of information thrown at you.
Yeah.
Having to regurgitate all this stuff or memorize all this stuff. So, I at every phase of life, even with struggle, I've been very blessed to have great support. Mm-hmm. Some of it I had to go and look for. I couldn't sit in a corner and, cry and pray for someone to come in and save me. I had to go out and seek it.
Yeah.
But I've always been blessed to have folks in the CAP Center. A lot of colleges and medical schools have CAP, counseling and psychological services, which I encourage every student to get to know, get to be familiar with in case you need help.
Yeah.
And they encouraged me. They said, you can do it. We can help. We can tutor. We can teach you the best way for you to learn, because everyone learns in a different way.
Yeah.
And they pushed me forward. And once I did OB/GYN pediatrics, I knew I wanted to put them together into family medicine. And that's what I've been doing ever since.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I want to highlight, a couple of things you said there. Number one, you talked about support, which obviously was really important for you. And number two was obviously getting like some psychological counseling if you need it. Full disclosure, I saw a therapist also in medical school. And it's just really helpful to bounce off like things that you're dealing with someone who is not going to judge you at all as a third party person. Super helpful. Can we talk about like just for a second, especially for student listeners or people in a tough situation right now? You talked about building out a little bit of support. What did that mean for you, or how did you seek that out?
So I growing up in church, I was pretty well connected to my pastor and my church family, and they knew what my goals and aspirations were. So they were always very encouraging. And a lot of churches, a lot of spiritual organizations have ministers that are trained in therapy.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I sought out ministers in my church that were therapists and that were trained in social work. Yeah. And were able to talk me through those things.
Yeah.
And then I, was smart. I don't know, smart enough, was resourceful enough to look around in my class, see the people that were really excelling and not struggling, like me and some of like my friends that I hung around.
Yeah.
And I asked them, I said, hey, what are you doing? Like, show me, like, teach me your moves. Like, how do you study?
Yeah.
And joined in with some study groups.
Yeah.
And that's really when I started to do better and was able to, I'm an audio visual learner, so I need to talk it out and see it and write it and color it.
Yeah.
And so working with a group was really helpful for me.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that I was that kind of learner until I went to a CAP center and had a professional to do testing and say, okay, this is the way you need to study.
Yeah.
This works. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, and I love that. I mean, the one thing there is just like the humility to know you need help is so huge, because a lot of the students, I mean, it sounds like you said, you kind of struggled through college a little bit, so maybe this wasn't 100% like you, but a lot of students, end up doing pretty well like throughout college, and then all of a sudden they're like, wait, what the heck is this med school thing? And it's totally ridiculous. And so I think that's great. And again, like just the humility to accept like, crap, like I'm falling behind, who's doing this right, who knows what they're doing. Like I love that tip. And it's super helpful. So we move forward now. You went into family, medicine residency. You went through that process, and you ended up figuring out kind of like the normal straight and narrow path wasn't for you. Can you kind of talk us through when you started realizing like this isn't exactly what you wanted?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, going through residency, I knew I wanted to be a family doc, take care of the entire family. I never thought I would have been in private practice, though. Never.
Okay.
I always thought I'm going to work for somebody. I'm going to join a group. I'm going to stay with the hospital because I don't want to deal with the billing stuff, the human resource stuff. I just want to see patients. Mm-hmm. So I was essentially forced into the life of an entrepreneur because the hospital that we worked for, after 2 years of me being the green doc on the block, trying to gain all the patients and, do all the work, they said, we're closing up the practice. So too bad for you. We're going to move you to these other practices. Don't worry about it. We'll pick you up and move you, as if that was easy.
Right.
And we banded together. At that time, it was me, my current partner, and 2 mid-levels. And we said, you know what? No. Do you want to move? I don't want to move. Do you like it here? I like it here too. And said, okay, well, let's own a practice. Let's just see. And thankfully we were able to find a management and billing group that could do the stuff that we didn't know how to do from a business perspective. And we could focus on just seeing the patients.
Yeah.
So that's how I was thrown into the not so straight and narrow, and became an entrepreneur, essentially 2 years of getting out of residency, right?
Yeah.
And that was very challenging. It was, I do not want to give anyone the impression that it was easy. I mean, there was a lot of legal, medical, legal, insurance, credentialing, compliance stuff that we had to go through, and it was a lot. But now that I'm working essentially for myself, I wouldn't have it any other way.
So I wanna jump in here, hypothetical situation. So let's say there's a family doc or a different specialist listening to this right now, and they're considering like opening up their own practice. You're in their shoes. What are some things right off the bat, like you wish you knew, or you kind of like had an awareness of, that you would tell someone who was in that kind of mindset or ready for a change?
They do it a lot more now than when I started out in medical school, but a lot of my colleagues are now getting their MBAs.
Okay.
And I don't know if I would, tell everyone to get an MBA, but you definitely want to seek out some business related classes and courses if you can while you're studying, because you want to know that stuff ahead of time. Another thing that I wish I would have known a little bit sooner was being a better coder in residency. A lot of the stuff that I know now about, kind of the ins and outs of billing efficiently and correctly, for correct reimbursement and, being in compliance, I didn't learn until I got into practice, and years into practice. We had some billing and coding in our last couple of years of residency, but not a lot.
Sure.
And a lot of what we learned actually ended up not necessarily being true, because I learned under a hospital system and not a private practice system where all of the burden fell on my shoulders.
Sure.
To take home the check. So
yeah.
If you kind of have a sense that you want to own your own thing while you're in training, I would seek out those things. So billing and coding in your particular specialty, and some business courses,
Sure.
some accounting, some organizational skills, those types of things.
Yeah. And you guys, your practice does take insurance, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, because I know that's a whole different ball game if you're, taking insurance versus for cash. And I obviously,
or the concierge model. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not there yet, but I've kind of heard different things. And, so would you also recommend, something that comes to mind is maybe someone like, if you had a practice model like yours, and they were interested in that, would you recommend they reach out to a mentor or someone who's already doing it, I'm assuming?
Absolutely.
Yeah. No,
absolutely.
And that's yep.
I'm sorry. And that's actually one thing that we did have a lot of good examples of while in residency. Like we have here in North Carolina, Dr. Brian Forrest is like huge in the concierge model world. And he would come and lecture us a lot when we were in residency. And then we had a number of community attendings that were in private or independent practices that would come and precept us. So we did have exposure to a lot of those folks. That's actually how I got my first job.
Yeah.
My first and only job with the practice that I co-own now is because the providers, the original providers that own the practice, would come back to UNC and precept. And so they would teach us about, quote unquote, the real world. And that was inspiring. Sure.
So that's great that you had like the mentorship and the help there. That's great. So kind of going through this, process, even now we're hearing you can't own your own practice. You can't do it. I'm curious from your perspective, how feasible do you really think it is to kind of go out there and do it? I don't think it's for everyone, right? But if you kind of have that spirit to kind of do it your way, do you think it's a feasible thing nowadays?
Absolutely. If I can do it, anybody can do it.
Okay.
I'm talking zero business sense is what I had walking into this thing. I knew also that, looking back, I don't think I could have done it as a solo practitioner. I think having partners is very, very major, particularly for those who don't feel as business savvy, because you don't have to do it by yourself. You don't have to know everything. I think it's probably, I don't know if I would say it was easier, but with the world of telemedicine, the fact that we can practice medicine on the internet now.
Yeah.
You don't have to have a brick and mortar to own your own thing.
Sure.
I think it's actually probably a little bit easier now than it was back in the day when you had to buy an office, hang a shingle, and,
Yeah.
own your own thing.
Yeah.
You can, operate within, you can just, there are some colleagues of mine that I've even seen that practice literally like out of booths,
Yeah.
like you rent a space within a building,
Yeah.
1 or 2 exam rooms, a desk, a chair, a sink, outsourced lab, facility work, and you can own your own space. So if you ask me, I think it's actually easier now than it was 10, 15 years ago to be your own boss.
No, that's amazing. I mean, I just like to hear people who are doing it because, something we learn on this podcast and learning from guests is there's the linear way, the way that everyone thinks you have to do it. And then we're kind of building out other ways of carving your life, which is really interesting. If we could build, like, just quickly, like a risks versus benefits sort of list, what are the risks realistically? What are the risks of going out and building something from your point of view?
The risks of being your own boss is, you definitely have to worry about liability. So you want to get really good lawyers and medical insurance and all that good stuff behind you, liability, because we are also a litigious culture now.
Right.
So you want to have all your ducks in a row from a legal standpoint and be covered if someone tries to sue you.
Yeah.
Which, God forbid, hopefully never happens. There are some financial risks. I mean, at the end of the day, you eat what you kill when you're in business for yourself. So if you decide you want to take 2 weeks vacation, then, realize that you may not make any money because you're not working. So you need to plan as much as you realistically can. And then a lot of that may include taking out some business loans, which of course comes with their own, you got to get your credit checked and there are interest rates and all that.
Right.
Other risks, especially when you first start a business, you'll definitely have some late nights and some stressful times.
Right.
As you're getting your feet wet and trying to figure out, try to find your way.
Yeah.
But still, the huge benefit, the one benefit that outweighs all of the risk in terms of, or as far as I'm concerned, is freedom.
Yeah.
So when I want to leave work early to go pick up my kids from school, I'm the only one I answer to, and the patient. But from a permission standpoint, I'm the one. Or when I want to take a vacation when my kids are off school, I'm the one. That I definitely don't take for granted at all.
That's amazing. Yeah, and I think that's the one thing that a lot of people feel in this process is like this sense of like servitude. And I actually had recently another guest, she likes to flip that servitude model and say it's an investment as opposed to servitude. But then it's only an investment if you end up using that investment to do something with it, right? So, for example, creating a practice or, like you, writing a book, and we're going to talk about that as well. So if you look at it as an investment and use that investment to then, like we talked about, super delayed gratification, but where's the gratification? That's the one thing, right? Like a lot of people are doing this and then there's no gratification. So that's so huge. So moving on a little bit, so we talked a little bit about the risks and the benefits. Let's move forward and talk about you developing a book. Like, how did you go about getting there? What was that process like? And let's talk about it. The Superwoman complex. Let's talk about this a little bit. I'm very interested.
Yeah, that was also an accident.
Okay.
What happened was
I stumbled into a book. No big deal.
I didn't mean it to be. So when my husband, by the way, he's an entrepreneur through and through. So he, was in journalism and then developed his own web and graphic business. And so I owe a lot of my entrepreneurial spirit to him. So once we jumped out there and decided we wanted to own a practice, largely with my husband's help and other, smarter business people around us, we were out there trying to gain more patients and kind of reintroduce ourselves to the world as Durham Family Medicine versus UNC Durham Family Practice. And with that, I started doing some writing. So I would write for local newspapers or churches or if someone was having a health fair, I would write this quick little health article about, what is diabetes? What is high blood pressure? What is depression? And when social media really started booming, I was not on Facebook, nothing, like I didn't want to be.
Right.
But my husband said, again, my husband with the entrepreneur spirit said, you know what? This thing called Facebook is free.
Yeah.
You need to be using this as a marketing tool, as an advertising tool. And so I started putting those articles that I've written onto social media to see what would happen. Will people in Durham find it, like it, and come and want to be our patients? And so that's what started happening. I was putting it out there, kind of gaining an audience for the practice for myself. Now I was being invited to come and speak at things, right? Because they saw that because once you write something and put your name on it, et cetera, you become quote unquote an expert in that thing. Yeah. So it was fun. It became fun. I was able to engage with people. I was able to talk to someone in California about diabetes. I was able to talk to someone in Alaska about depression. It was really fun, much more fun than I actually thought it was. Initially. So long story short, about 2 or 3 years later, again, still kind of writing and doing these things. I was looking around at some of my colleagues and peers and seeing that, they were coming out with books or they were publishing in different medical publications, et cetera. And I said, I wonder if all this stuff that I've written over the last couple of years, I wonder if I can kind of put this together and, just kind of see what happens. The funny example I use is Puff Daddy published a book called Culo. Do you know what that word means?
Well, I think in Spanish, isn't that like, it's butt, right? But the other way, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. He published a book about butts. If he can do that, then clearly we as bright and smart medical professionals who went to school and have all this knowledge, we have something to share with the world too. So literally that was the thing that made me think, you know what? I have this wonderful information to share. I feel like I explain it fairly well to lay people, and I can translate these huge medical words into language that people can actually understand. Yeah. Why don't I try it? And that's literally how that first, How to Avoid the Superwoman Complex book came to be. Was combining these.
I'm just thinking right now, like there's a booty book out there.
Like, come on.
If there's a book about butts, I can write anything. What? Everyone listening right now, guys, like there's a book about booties out there.
And you can do it.
And I'm not talking about the pirate booty. I'm talking about like regular booty. And
anatomical butt. That's right.
So if there's an anus book out there, you can write anything you want.
That's right. And so I was like, I have something important to say to the world. I can do this too. So I went through Amazon, and that's how I published my first book. Yeah. And then this whole Superwoman Complex thing came from, I am, probably will always be a bit of a superwoman because, I'm working, I own a business, I have these kids I have to take care of, I have a husband I have to take care of. We're always taking care of all these people, not leaving enough time for ourselves. And then as the family doc, I end up seeing these women in clinic and having to write all these prescriptions to treat these things that are likely related to all the stress that they're under, right? And I myself had this like complex migraine TIA thing happen 2 to 3 years into private practice after having my first child. And I said, you know what? I'm probably doing a lot. Yeah. Much. Let me slow down. Let me focus on self-care. Let me really figure out, let me prioritize, cut back, and started reading about it. And, the Superwoman syndrome has been a thing since the 1980s. And there's a book that was written called The Superwoman Syndrome in the 1980s that I read. And I said, you know what? I want to kind of modernize this thing. Sure. Brought it to the 2000s, and I've been having fun ever since. I wrote a second book about it. Yeah. And then the whole publishing piece, I have a publishing company. And by company, I mean me, my husband, and like one other person that helps with like editing and all that. But publishing piece came from us literally having, self-published these books. And then my friends and colleagues and other docs came to me asking for advice and for recommendations. Yeah. And that's literally how the publishing piece got started. That's awesome. And I've been helping docs publish ever since.
Amazing. I love that. And it's so interesting because like and I've noticed this with the whole podcasting thing too, is like you kind of have an interest, you kind of fell into writing this book after the articles. You put in the effort, and then you kind of become that little mini expert. Like, you're a physician who published a book, and now all of a sudden, like, well, I'm a physician. I want to publish a book. How do I,
Right.
And so you kind of pave the way for other people.
And I was like, I can charge for this.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Yeah.
Entrepreneurial spirit right there. I love it.
Entrepreneur. That's right.
I love it. So you create this book. Just like to understand, just to summarize, the Superwoman complex. So this is like a woman who feels like they can conquer anything. They put a lot onto themselves, and that's almost too much, and it can create this sense of stress. And ultimately, what you break down in this book is kind of how to deal with that complex and kind of find your humanity. I'm assuming, in a way, right? Like reconnecting. Right. So for someone who has a Superwoman complex, I know obviously you wrote a book about it, so it's not going to be simplified in a second. But what's one tip that you'd give someone, who's kind of struggling with that?
The biggest thing that I'm still practicing and learning to do nowadays is learning to say no. You have to learn and say no unapologetically, like not explaining after you say no, but just no, because people will. Especially if you are a high achieving woman, like most of us who probably are listening to this podcast are, if you're in the medical profession, people will literally suck you dry. Your patients, your employees, your employer, your brother, sister, mother, father, etc. They will all at some point want something from you. And sometimes they really do take advantage of you. And you have to learn to say, no, I'm not going to run the bake sale. I'm not going to answer your phone call at 3 a.m. because you hate your boyfriend. I'm not, you have to create those boundaries so that you can protect yourself. And being selfish is very necessary for survival.
And that was, what you just said is such a huge lesson I learned probably over this year. Especially,
there's a Superman complex too.
No, totally. I mean, just with like residency too. Like, I mean, when we're working these crazy hours, like I have to sleep, like, like I have to like make time for the gym, and it's really tough because, I love people and I want to connect, and it's just like that balance of, putting yourself out there and connecting, but also saying no. It's a tough thing, and I love that you mentioned it.
You have to. You have to.
That's a beautiful tip. Like, thank you. That's like awesome. So now we talked about the books a little bit, and then the other part of that was the thinking about quitting medicine part, and I want us to touch on that as well. Obviously a very catchy title. I'm sure you have a very positive take on it. And so thinking about quitting medicine, I mean, I'm sure plenty of people, me included, we've gone through this. We've worked super hard. We get exhausted and like, what the heck? Like for example, we talked about this before. I was I was probably the unhealthiest I've ever been in medical school. I was exhausted. Definitely had those thoughts of quitting. So what does that mean to you, and kind of what was this project?
Yep. One thing that stood out to me, as I was, blossoming into a doc and owning the practice and all that stuff and writing the books about Superwoman Complex was, I read an article that said that 400 doctors commit suicide every year.
Yeah.
400.
Yeah.
That's a crazy number.
Yeah.
And a lot of them, unfortunately, occur during residency.
Yeah, that's nuts.
So, right. And so I said, what is happening? Why is this happening? What is going on? And through, I went to Atlanta to do, my brother who lives in Atlanta had a book signing party for me when my second book came out a couple of years ago. And I met Dr. Manny St. Victor, my partner, at that book signing party. I think we connected on social media initially. Mm-hmm. Actually, I take that back. His brother went to Duke with me, but was a couple years older.
Okay.
But his brother said, you know what? I see what you're doing on social media. I love the books and all that. You need to connect with my brother, who's very like-minded. He was able to come to the book signing party in Atlanta, and we just hit it off because we were talking about the same stuff, the same stressors, the same burdens about medicine. He is a psychiatrist, but is not in clinical practice. Mm-hmm. He has an entrepreneur spirit and hated medical school, hated residency. And so, we talked about why that is. And we said, you know what? There are many, many docs like us that feel this way. We love medicine. We love the field. We love the career. That's why we got into it. but there are things about the bureaucracy, a lot of things within the system that suck.
Yeah.
And will suck you dry. So what can we do to change that?
Yeah.
And we said, you know what? Let's talk about it. Let's have conversations. Let's discuss it.
Yeah.
And we got together with 11 other physicians, including us, and we wrote the book about our own journey, our individual story about how we, suffered from depression and made our way back, or we left medicine altogether and became an NFL cheerleader, or we, like me, started writing because not only was it fun and a great way to market, but it was liberating.
Yeah.
How we made it through, just to hopefully encourage others to do the same. And so that's how it came about.
Wow. And that's such a great project. And I recently talked to someone else about this too. It's like everyone says, like, keep going, it's going to get better, all of this stuff. But there are also people that have totally other interests who went in it with really good intentions, and things aren't 100% like what it seems. And then what do you do with it? So through this,
right.
Through this project, I'm thinking about, I know people are going to connect with this. I mean, we all connect to it. Like, there's no way not to, because it's a tough field. So what are some of the things, like some of the topics that you discussed or learned from that process?
Yeah. I think one thing that I've learned, or that, is a running theme throughout the book, is asking for help and not being afraid to ask for help. So whether that's, from a therapy and counseling standpoint, or finding mentors, or like we talked about earlier, you want to start a private practice. So finding someone that has done that successfully and connecting with them, or, you don't have to do any of these things alone. So we don't want anyone to ever feel isolated.
Yeah.
They're the only person that has experienced it, because you are likely not.
Yeah.
So creating your community, networking, creating that tribe of folks that support you and that can help you is major. And I think you hit the nail on the head earlier. You said, you were an athlete and you had a very competitive spirit, and you went to medical school with that spirit. Learning how to connect and bond with others is major.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's so powerful. And so one thing I wanted to mention as you were bringing that up was there's a quote I took from one of your articles, and I want to connect it to this. And it says, "Our goal as physicians should be to create a community that raises awareness that frustration is often a signal that what you're doing is not working. From there, we will get doctors on a fast path to realizing that there is nothing pathological about how they are feeling before damage to self-esteem and self-worth kicks in." And I like that quote from, I think it was your Kevin MD article you had online. And I want to mention that because that frustration, everyone accepts it as a normal thing. And it's not just within, doctors. I see nurses, I see a lot of health professionals. But if there's frustration there, there's nothing wrong with you. That means that there's something that we need to be working on.
Right.
And that, thinking about quitting medicine, there's a reason why you feel that way and you feel so distraught and you want things to change. And everyone accepts it. It's just their issue or something. And so that's why I get excited about these conversations like the one we're having, because we should normalize the fact that we are frustrated, we are angry, we've had enough, and we want change. And then I have a beautiful example like you who, I'm being serious, I have a beautiful example like you who is doing something different, who you said you have a sense of freedom. How many people have a sense of freedom in medicine?
Right. Exactly.
It's sad I have to say that, right? It's crazy. And so actually I did want to also touch on, there's these new groups coming out now who are creating this sense of community. I'm sure you're familiar with the physician side gigs and all of these other groups. And so you think now it's even easier to create that sense of freedom. That's true?
Yes. And to create that sense of community, because all of these groups are coming out. So, FYI, if you're on Facebook thinking about quitting medicine, we have our page there too. I think we're soon going to kind of turn that into a group. So I think having the group kind of fosters that sense of more sense of bonding, whether just other than just posting stuff that people kind of like and comment. We want to engage and start conversations. So, but yes, side gigs, and I'm part of. There's one called Mocha Medicine.
Yeah.
For female physicians of color. There's physician mommy group. There's all kinds of groups now where you don't have to feel stuck or alone.
Amazing. I love it. So you've offered us in this conversation like so many gems. Like, I'm thinking about it. We talked about your process of going to family medicine. We talked about, creating a practice. We talked about you writing a book. You talked about the thinking about quitting medicine group. And so I think you personally are an amazing mentor. How do people reach out to you?
Yes. So on social media, I have a Doc Swiner page through Thinking About Quitting Medicine, and feel free to message me, direct message. My website is docswiner.com, DOCSWINER.com, and you can join our email list through that page as well. And so, Twitter, Instagram, Doc Swiner, everywhere you can find me.
Beautiful, beautiful. And to close out this beautiful conversation we're having, what is a tip you would like people to leave from this conversation today?
A lot of what I talk about, both with, my patients or when I'm talking about the Superwoman complex, is getting good sleep. And it sounds simple, but I think you were just talking, you were physically, emotionally, mentally exhausted, right?
Yeah.
And many of us usually are, but we definitely need a good solid 6 to 8 hours of sleep on most nights, every night if you can. But it's restorative, it's rejuvenating. Be selfish about it. Cut your phone off, do all that stuff so you can get some rest, because otherwise you'll be miserable. So get some sleep.
Amazing.
Don't grind all night all the time.
Amazing. And what I love is so simple. So everyone listening to this conversation, if it's late right now, shut off.
Go to sleep.
Shut off this podcast episode. Stop it right here. You should be closing your eyes. Say no. Like we said before, say no to everything. It's time to sleep.
That's right.
Doc Swiner, thank you so much for being with us today. You're an absolute pleasure. I know there's so much more we can learn from you, and I'm looking forward to keeping the connection going.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening to the Happy Doc Podcast, the voice of fulfilled physicians. If you enjoyed the episode, please drop us a like, comment, and share. Share us through the social media channels we have on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The handle is @HappyDocPodcast. That's @HappyDocPodcast. You can find our website at www.thehappydoc.com. Again, thank you so much for listening to the Happy Doc, the voice of fulfilled physicians.